And time for us to talk to our friend, Mr. John Keim, ESPN, the John Keim Report. What's up, Johnny? How are you, buddy?
What up, guys? How are you, man?
Sure, man. What's happening with you?
We're good, man. We're kicking around the idea of an international game.
Yeah, where do you think it's going to be?
Well, I want it to be in Madrid. I'm gearing up. I'm like bracing for Brazil, but I want it to be in Madrid.
Do you not want Brazil specifically, or
Brazil
you just
be the first week?
Madrid would be middle of the season.
Okay.
Brazil's opening weekend.
I mean, Brazil would be the opening week. I don't want it to be.
Yeah, I prefer Madrid. I like Spain, so that's part of it. You know, I don't know about Brazil. I know Standig was talking about getting new Speedo, hitting the beaches down there. I don't know.
I'm damn sure not going to Brazil then. If that's the case, I don't want to be nowhere near that country.
The only thing, the tough part with Brazil is like last year, all you heard about was like traffic problems and this and that. Like that, I don't know that it sounded great, but you know, I've never been to South. I'm not going to turn it down. Like I've never been to South America, so I think that would be kind of cool. But if I had the choice, I would prefer Madrid.
Yeah,
and the other thing, JP, with that too, like the one thing, you get Brazil, then you may have a later bye week. Like in other words, it's not that week, right?
Yeah, totally.
If you get Madrid and it's like in week 6, your bye week is week 7, which is fine, but you know, like you like it a few weeks later. But I think this team greatly benefited from a later bye week this year. So you'd have an earlier bye week, and then you'd have with 17 game seasons, like in the playoffs like this, I'd rather have middle to late bye weeks at this point.
Sure. That's a good point. I don't know that either will happen, right? There were a couple of years ago, you and I remember talking, really thought there was a Germany trip coming, and then it ended up not happening. I do think, though, Washington is a much juicier ticket now with Jayden Daniels, and I think Jayden Daniels is the kind of guy that can actually move the needle nationally and hell, maybe internationally.
Well, that's why I think I would guess that it would happen, right? Just because of him. And they're so much more marketable because of him. And he's a guy that could be not just the face of a franchise, but if he keeps on this trajectory, you know, does he become a face of the league or the face of the league in a few years? So why not introduce him internationally now? And they haven't been anywhere since 2016. It just makes sense. And there are 2 games on the schedule with the Dolphins and the Chargers that it would make sense to take that one overseas. So like, it does make sense that they would play there this year. At some point, you got to put them back there. And it seems like it's setting up for them this year, but who knows?
I'm with you, and I'm hoping that they go to Madrid also.
Yeah, the only question, like the one thing with Brazil, you're probably there all week. With Madrid, you could go when they went to London last time. Remember, they went over
Thursday night.
They took the red eye Thursday night, so you're not really there all that long.
Gosh, do you remember where that?
I think they'll go before Thursday if they go there this time.
My guess is
they have better people in charge.
Well, thank you, and that's the other thing, because like you point to the Arizona trip last year. They would not have done that with the previous ownership. So I think this group
hell
would
no,
understand,
been staying at Motel 6.
It's just a matter of spending money, and they try not to do that. Do you remember where the practice was in London? It was at that like rugby club.
Yeah,
and there were just empty kegs all over the place.
Yes, I do.
You trying
remember.
to see if there's anything left in it?
No, it was.
Well, in fairness, Mitch was there before we got there, so maybe
you got a point.
Talking.
No. It was fun being over there, but you really only listen. You're there to work.
Yeah, it's not
so
like
yeah, and so it's not like you're exploring all day and all night, whatever. You get it. You know, you are there to work, and so like you have to. That's part of the deal. But at least when we were there, like you had the Saturday where you could go do something. And that was cool.
I went there for NFL Europe, and I spent 2 weeks straight. I explored. I was working, but I was exploring. So you go to Spain, know some areas you can go to.
Oh yeah, listen, yeah. And if you're there, but again, if you're there all week, then you have more of a chance to go out to dinner, to do stuff, and actually, get a feel for the place versus, a rush trip. But yeah, whatever. Like, I think either would be kind of cool because it'd be different. And I think it's where this franchise is at that I think the league would want to take advantage. I mean, shoot, JP, like I'm expecting, several primetime games this year.
All of them, man. So, they're going to max it out. Talking with our friend John Keim. You can read his work at ESPN.com. You can give him a follow at John_Keim, Keim. Check out on YouTube the John Keim Report. Dude, so next week we'll be in Indy. Adam Peter's going to talk. Dan Quinn's going to talk. All the rumor mill will start to go bananas. I don't know how real a pursuit of Myles Garrett is. It doesn't seem like a pursuit of T. Higgins is real at all. Right. Deebo Samuel's very much a real, at least possibility. Kind of getting ready for the combine. What is your mind about possible big swings from Washington?
Well, I think the big swing would be Myles Garrett. And, I think if you're going to take a big swing, you're going to take it in a guy who's a defensive game changer. And that's what he is. And so the other thing with him, if you went that route, and then of course, like everything depends on the cost, right? So let's say they decide like, okay, the cost is worth it. Well, if you get a guy like that, he's 29 years old. You're going to give him an extension. So let's say you have him for at least 3 or 4 years, right? When his contract, if you want to start getting out of his contract, that's when Jayden Daniels' contract is up. So in other words, it fits nicely into that time frame of when you can take advantage of a Jayden Daniels contract, because that's the whole ability behind having a guy in his spot that you can take advantage of that. And this is one way to do it. The question then is, because obviously Adam Peters, very big proponent of building through the draft. How does this impact that ability? Well, if you take away like this, let's say they made the trade before the draft. Now it might be after, because there are a lot of financial ramifications with Garrett's contract. But let's say for this purpose, it's before the draft. We're giving up the 29th pick. And if you get Myles Garrett, you're kind of expecting to pick low next year as well. Yeah. And so you're talking about 2 low first-round picks for if that's what it costs. And maybe I'm sure there's some machinations where you get something back, whatever. So you're getting a defensive game changer for 3 or 4 years or so. And what are you giving up? So I think like that's the one. If you're going to take a swing, that would make sense. So with Deebo, you could get him for a lower round pick. At most. And then I think it may be to a point, because you look at like this receiver, there are going to be some interesting receivers that come free. I mean, what if Christian Kirk comes free? He's got a high cap number for the Jaguars and he played for Cliff Kingsbury. So do you have to go send a draft pick to 49ers for Deebo? Or can you just say like, we like him if they like him, but there are other guys that are going to be available. And so you don't have to go do that for a receiver. And T. Higgins I just think that would be a lot at that position. Yeah. I think they showed, Jayden Daniels gives you so much flexibility because of the contract, but also because of the talent, that they had a really good offense with, a rotating door at number 2 receiver, as Dan Quinn said would happen. I mean, look at what they did with, and so you don't, there will be interesting guys available. I think that wouldn't be as costly, whether, and some in the draft, but some others in free agency that, make more sense. But I'd want to spend on the O-line and then if you can get that defensive game changer like Garrett, then you're in good shape.
If you look at what they did last year, and it may make you take a pause when it comes down to trying to get the top receivers out there.
For sure. Sure.
But I think defensively, they have to put some interest into that tremendously.
Yes. I mean, they have to improve there. And, it's funny because, I was looking at this stat, like defenses against the run, like they were bottom 3 or 4. Of the bottom 11 teams against the run last year, 1 made the playoffs. I think it was. I think that's the stat. It's pretty, so like it's hard to consistently do that when you're not better against the run. So you want to get better there. But I think if, or at least more game-changing plays, whether, in terms of forms of turnovers. Mm-hmm. And they weren't great in that area this year either. So get guys who can do that. And, so I think, I'd want to get another corner if I'm them. But I think this is a good draft for corners that would have the size and the length that I think that Dan Quinn has typically favored. So then you compare that person with Lattimore and Samerstill. So like and if you bring Igbinoghene back, now you've got depth. So, I think there's ways to do that, but I'm with you. Like I'd attack the lines on both sides. I'd want to give Jayden more time, but also improve that run game. And, I think that's an area that you'd want to get better at, just to balance things out and not have to rely on Daniels to be a big force in the run game. Let him use it when you need it, but not be the main focus.
Yeah, I mean, he was their leading rusher, 6 of the last 8 games or something?
Yeah, it's a hard way to go. And he can do it, but it's asking a lot of him. And I think you just make your offense better when you have others who can hurt you consistently in that area.
Yeah, you keep him out of harm's way too.
Yeah, exactly.
You mentioned a few times beefing up the O-line, like the lines, and I think they've got big decisions with Allen, and then offensively, I mean Wiley. There's decisions that are coming. How much, if any, do you expect kind of some veterans to get released or some contracts to get reworked? I don't know what they're going to do in these next 3 weeks.
Yeah, I think with John, he's in the last year of his contract, and right. I think it's he's over 22 against the cap this year. I think that's hard at this point. So you do something with his contract, whether you extend for a couple of years and lower the cap hit and give him some guarantee money in exchange for that, or do you outright cut him? That's $17 million savings. So I would think it's one or the other, but I don't know for sure. And then Wiley is the other one at right tackle that he's got a lower cap number. So if you can find someone better, great, but if not, and then if you released him, it's $7 million savings. So now you have a little bit more to play with, but I think you have to be careful and make sure that you are finding a good alternative, because then it's going to, because with all these guys you cut, you have to replace. And even if people want to cut John Allen, well, you've got to replace him. And so can you do that at a good cap number with someone who could be here for the next several years? That's something you have to look at. And I think one of the things when you're building this roster out, I do think you want to keep an eye on, a 3-year window. Not that that's the only window you have here, but that's you want to kind of, to me, take those snapshots of that time. How's this player going to be in year 3 of that deal? And are they going to help you consistently contend for the next 3 years and build the roster that way? So that's what I would try to do if possible. But I would expect something to be done with that, because you can free up cap space, and it's funny because they do have cap space, but they also have so few players signed for next year that it's somewhat misleading. They're still going to be okay, but I think the second fewest players signed for next year, I believe, is still the stat. So they have whatever it is, 68, 70 some million. Arizona's right behind them with a few more million less, but about 15 more players already signed. So they're in a better spot. So you have to keep that in mind when going out and looking at these moves. But I also think they showed last year their approach was bring in some of these veterans for leadership, Ertz, Wagner, et cetera, but then sign some core guys, Louvu, Biotish, Dorrance Armstrong, those kind of guys.
Do you expect a similar approach, or more of an approach where we're going to get some guys that we need that could be impact players, but didn't they go for exactly like they did last year, or it's more like last year?
I think that's a good question. And, I think one thing we've learned with Adam Peters is you don't always know. But I think last year, you kind of figured they were going to be, what you kept hearing, very active, and they were. But I think what we've seen with whether it's Josh Harris's other teams, they will take swings. When Peters was in San Francisco, they took some big swings. So I could see a mixture of that. Maybe if there's an impact player that they feel would help them that fits, the kind of player, person, whatever culture they want, then I could see that, because they do have that ability to go for somebody like that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, then again, like, who is that person? I think, again, right now, Myles Garrett is the obvious choice, and there's other guys that maybe you look into. Is a Trey Hendrickson available? Guys like that, who, again, would be here for a few years and impact players for a few years.
That was one name I was going to bring up to you real quick, was specifically Hendrickson. If this Garrett thing seems like the contract, it seems like there's a lot of layers there that are going to make that complicated.
There's a lot there it's very, yes, correct. But the Browns don't even want to do anything. So right now, so
that's what they say till they get the right offer.
Sure, I agree with that.
I also here's the other thing with the Garrett situation, is you have a staff that has to win now. It's kind of hard to accomplish that by trading your best player now.
Right.
So the one thing I wonder with them is, and this is where it's going to be like, how dug in are both sides? Like the Browns on their desire not to trade him, and Garrett and his desire to be traded. Like, would he come back and say, okay, see where it goes this year? If it's not going well at the deadline, then you trade him. Like, is that a possibility? I don't know. But I know that both sides kind of are dug in on their position, and somebody always blinks. Like, we've heard this before with sides, and somebody always blinks. And, when does that happen?
Mm-hmm. Agreed. I think that Cincinnati situation seems like such a mess that Hendrickson could really become available. And I think, one, your compensation on that is significantly less than Garrett both what you have to pay in the draft and what you have to pay the player. Garrett's the better player, but Hendrickson's pretty damn good. 35 sacks in 2 years, pretty damn good.
Does his number go up if Garrett is off the market?
Probably. I mean, those guys are hard to find, man.
Yeah.
They're hard to find that. And, if you're Cincinnati, because like they have contract decisions with obviously with T. Higgins, what are they going to do there? And then Hendrickson, and I think Jamar Chase's deal is up soon too. So
he's in the fifth-year option.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So like they have to figure all that out. And where, is it better to keep Jamar and Trey, and with, so you have someone on both sides, or, can you keep all those guys? I think for that organization, that might be difficult. So you have to at least inquire.
Got it. I think one good thing with Peters is he is at least going to make calls on everything.
Sure.
At least making calls on everything. And maybe it doesn't make sense. Maybe it doesn't make sense right now. There's a lot of fluidity in a lot of these decisions. And I think it's going to be fun, man. I don't know that there's a spending spree coming, but I do think there is a move, like a bigger move than maybe we expect coming.
Right. And I think active is also, because like I said, like last year, Frankie Louisville was not a top tier free agent. He was a really good signing, but he was not, you know what I mean? Like, so you may not get, just because, again, you have to look at the cap space in as far as how it really is versus like, okay, it's just big number. But I think I could see them being out, and plus they have to re-sign a lot of guys. So, that's part of the activity. But I think, you're going to have to add somebody, but I'm with you. Like, I could see a big move. If not, then just continue building the roster with guys who can be good players for you for the next several years. Right. Mm-hmm. Like, that's such a smart way to go. And I do think then it's like, how do you look at the roster? Is this a win right now roster? I think there's still more work to do, and I'm going to guess that they would agree with that. And every team's going to agree with that to a degree. But like, if you're the Eagles, how close are they to the Eagles roster? And that's how I'd want to measure. And then how do you get there? And you just get more good players, and then you can, if you want to hold on to your draft capital and do it that way as well, and keep building out the roster to make it so you can have that sustainable winner. And I think that's one thing with Peters. I think he's pretty clear on his vision of how he wants to build, and I'm going to guess he sticks to that.
And if you look at Philly, one of the reasons they're able to pay, a handful of guys really good money on extensions, not free agency, but extensions, is draft really well and have just like such a solid
they got
core.
A ton of young bulls.
It is. For sure. And like that's, to me, that's the model of how you do it, because like they have, you look at both their lines, and, they made an aggressive trade for AJ Brown, but most of that stuff is going to be homegrown. And that's, It's now, I mean, there's such a model organization with that how, and I think Jayden Daniels closes the gap for you with a lot of teams, but you still want it to be where, okay, you obviously want to get better now, but you want to make it so that way as more he continues to improve, because he will, then you can make a run, for a few years and sustain it because you have certain pieces in place for a few years. So I think there's, and let's, what if, I don't think they go out and do this, but what if they went out and got a guy like Khalil Mack, who that would probably be more of a 1-year type deal.
Be similar to Wagner last year, or Ertz.
Similar to Wagner. Yeah. Now, like my preference would be not to add more 30-plus guys. However, if you do that, could you go, let's say you got him, but you draft James Pierce, let's say, or some edge rusher that then gives you the ability to develop somebody while getting somebody who can help you right now. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there are ways you can do it that makes sense. But my preference would be, more guys in or near their prime. But, I think then it all depends on and that's where I think you just have to kind of trust what these guys do, because they showed last year that they had a pretty good approach.
John, thank you for your time as always, buddy. Appreciate you.
Thanks, guys.
You're cool, brother.
That's our guy, John Keim. Check out the John Keim report and all his work on ESPN.com. Keim joining us via the Rude Guest Hotline.